Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. It is time to bring our friends in from Twitch, so let's fire those babies up and see what they've got to say. All right, Twitch, here we go. Hello, Twitch. You people disgust me. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. It's Thursday, the 3rd of August, 2024. Still no jetpacks. So that'll do it. That'll pretty much do it for our show tonight. We'll be back when the jetpack's ready. As it turns out, they are renovating the entire floor, so there's probably going to be noise, but this time I just have to power through it on account of there's nothing we can do about that because this might be going on for a while. I hope everybody is doing well. I have friends in the Carolinas who are didn't get beaten as badly as some places, but they got hit pretty hard, and they're helping out people who got hit harder. And just finished editing Right Angle called No Shows. Guess who I'm talking about? Two public figures. Seems like we're doing okay here with the technical problems we had last time. Seem to have disappeared after having cleaned this up and moved stuff around. But the delay seems to be longer than usual, so that may be a bit of a problem in terms of me responding to texts and so on. Anyway, hope everybody's doing well. I've been, as you know, we repeatedly check the election betting odds, which don't really guarantee anything, but they have been, at the very, even if it's just a poll, at the very least, it's the same poll I've been going back to time and time again. So let's just have a quick peek over there, why don't we? Because I think Trump was down by 2 points last time I checked, which is still astonishing, but I'm not really very worried about this. Yeah, now he's closer to 1.5 points. 48.7 to 50.2 for the vice president, the challenger, the incumbent challenger. Let's work this backwards. When's the last time that this would have happened? Would it have been 2000 when there was an active vice president running? Well, 2020, but that doesn't count because he wasn't vice president at the time. So yeah, I think, right? I'll tell you one thing. They need to unleash J.D. Vance, man. I don't know, Steve. I didn't find it. Well, you didn't miss anything. Yeah, I think pretty sure it was the 2000 election, since there's been a sitting VP that's been running. That's a quarter of a century. And so it's difficult for the sitting VP to run as a challenger, but that's how Harris has been doing it. That's how and you got to give him credit for it. It's evil and it's complete nonsense, obviously, but it's a strategy. What they're basically doing is they're running Harris as the challenger to President Trump as if he was still in office. How many people are going to buy this? I don't know. I just, as I say, finished, well, it'll be up first thing in the morning, Right Angle called No Shows about how pathetic the federal assistance has been in the Carolinas after Hurricane Helene. And then up tomorrow will be my show for the week, which is called Triple Threat. You've got a war with Israel and a full-on shooting war with Iran now. You've got Hurricane Helene, and you've got this longshoreman strike, none of which seem to be terribly well handled in terms of the current administration's parentheses S. Let me see here. You don't think there are groups who live off big government funds who are getting House taxpayer money to skew those numbers? Look, I'm not really I'm not sure these numbers tell us anything, even though I like election betting odds better than I like most polls, the having just come back from a week in Idaho last weekend, I know that I've talked to a very, very smart friend of mine named Brent Regan, smartest guy I know, and he's extremely active in North Idaho politics. He says the only polls that are any good at all that really, really matter are the ones you pay for, meaning the internals. And the internal polls done by the candidates, he says he's feeling pretty good about Trump, so we'll see. But the dock workers strike has been postponed. That makes me look like I may have to substitute a different show because I've got another show in the can. That's a piece of news that I missed today. Is that somebody confirmed that for me? Strike is resolved, back to work tomorrow. Okay. Well, that's why I do the show, so that I can catch up on the views of the world. That was close. Thanks for catching that for me. I appreciate it. Until January 15th, just until the election. Thank you, Lapco. So they didn't want it to hurt Harris's chances. Okay, that makes sense actually to me. Yeah. Jay Coulter says they can't survive. The country can't take another 4 years of this, says Kamala Harris. I don't know, man. I'm still a big believer in energy levels, and when she's having to bus people in to her rallies, and Trump, that son of a gun. This has probably already happened too, on account of me being a little slow on the uptake this week in terms of the news stories. But Trump going back to Butler, that's just natural showmanship. It's so it's just such perfect. It's just such a perfect ear for political drama. I really honestly think that Jake Coulter says it's so alpha. It's not just alpha. It's just great showmanship. And L. Stone says balls of steel. It's that too. But it's just such great showmanship. It's I'm telling you, there are times when Donald Trump really outshines Churchill, and Churchill understood the value of optics, what we call optics these days. But in any event, hey, that's quite all right. Sad Wings Raising, and thank you very much for that. Who said no super chats tonight because he's already made donations to people who need it, more than I do. Although I do wish, in the midst of all of this fuss about the hurricanes, people would pay more attention to me and my needs. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I just want to say it once. It's just yes, I understand the hurricane's a big deal and everything, but what about me? What about me and my business and my super chats? Well, what a teabag. But that wasn't actually me. I was just joking. Yeah, I thought I'd always known that Vance was a good choice. I just hadn't seen it from the sound bites. But watching clips from the VP debate, he not only had Timmy looked like looked like he just heard a knock at the door and there were narcs coming to the house. Timmy didn't look really very calm. And Vance, I think one of the reasons, and I've thought this since he was selected as a running mate. I thought there were other choices that that Trump could have made strategically that might have been better for his chances of getting elected, but I didn't think that there would be, I could probably think of one or two names. I'm just such a Josh Hawley fan, but I don't think that one of the main reasons to vote for Donald Trump would be because of President Vance. because when he was talking about having to miss medical payments to pay rent or he lived this, and the movie was extremely popular before he became popular, in which case he was disowned by the storytelling glitterati, but he has genuine compassion. Well, I kind of think I agree. Let me just get that name right again because it's low contrast. Like I said, it's not the vanity so much as just don't like the reflection in the eyes. Lesko Brandon, Lesko Brandon said best debate performance since Reagan. I think I might agree with that. Lady Jane wants to know what would happen if Vance ran against Kamala for POTUS. I've been wondering this myself. I kind of back away from that thought because there's only one circumstance that could cause that to actually happen, and I don't want that to happen. And first of all, I want Trump to win. I want to see Trump win. But I think that that when people get a chance to see the guy, he's really got the goods, I liked how compassionate he was, and I liked how firm he was when he was getting fact-checked, and they're playing the 3 versus 1 game again, and then, he's mansplaining things. It's like, well, you know what, babe? If you didn't have to ask such stupid questions, you wouldn't get mansplained so much, sweet cheeks. That's what I have to say about that. Mansplaining is just another word for explaining, and I'm sorry if it bothers you that it's coming from somebody else, but you were playing that 3 against 1 thing. For our viewers at home, we'd just like to remind them that the Haitians did have legal authority. Well, now if we're going to bring that up, then let's just remind the viewers at home that this legal authority was, granted them by Kamala Harris at the last minute, and so on and so on and so forth. But boy, he is Timmy did not impress a lot of people, well, Dave Big Booty is clarifying what I just said. Ladies, mansplaining is short for man explaining, and we don't go around explaining things just because we feel the need to explain things. We'd much rather just not explain things. It's really much easier to not have to explain things. So just because a couple of broads, decide that they're going to try to play the triple threat game, JD wasn't having it. I'm not having it either. So, exactly, Quebec. So, I just wish it had been seen by more people. Now, I was surprised to hear that that there may not be another debate, or maybe it's already been decided. Like I said, I've been a little out of the loop this last several days in terms of current events. But when Harris said she was willing to go again, I thought, my God, what an idiot! I think that Trump should take up that challenge. But somebody told me that Trump was thinking he wouldn't do it. He lost a lot of points last time. I guess it's maybe the idea is that Harris's expectations are so low. If she just shows up, she wins automatically. But I don't know. I think one thing I've learned about Donald Trump is that he seems to, I don't even know if I would say he's a fast learner, but he's a learner. He did not do very well against her with these, the whole, I don't want to raise, because I got, 2x4 in the face about the whole they're eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. But I don't think it was where you really want to make that attack, not without some picture it didn't happen. I think I think he should have gone after her hard, hard on the border, and 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 kept it there, and kept it on this idea that that you're not the challenger, you're the incumbent. I'm the challenger. I would have just stayed there, and I think you should. I think you should go back and do it. I think you should get her out there and just hit her up with some actual facts, you know. And also, I would get her up there in order to call out this call her out on this whole Donald Trump had the worst economy, you know, or the worst job numbers of any modern president, you know. Well, that's because of the pandemic. And so let's talk about the pandemic. This is what I would do if I was Trump. I said, yeah. Well, you're saying that you had the biggest job recovery and the most job creation because the people who got sick during the pandemic went to work again. And I know this, and you know this, and the American people knows this. Everybody knows this. So the question is, why are you taking credit for this? Because it seems to me that everything that I said of Donald Trump now about the pandemic turned out to be true, and everything that you said about the pandemic turned out to be a lie. Not just wrong, but knowingly wrong. I said that the virus came from Wuhan virology lab. You said I was making it up and I was racist, but it came from the Wuhan virology lab, and everybody knows that now. And I said that there are treatments that mitigate the effects of COVID prior to the development of a vaccine, including hydroxychloroquine. And you said that I was a lunatic and I was wrong, but it turns out, no, I was right about that. And I said that there was a lot of funny business going on with Dr. Fauci and his attachment to the Wuhan lab, and with the National Institute of Health, and with the Center for Disease Control and all that. And you said I was nuts, but it turned out I was right about that too. I was right about all these things. I was right about the economy. I was right about the virus. I was right about the lab. I was right about all of these things. And you were wrong. And lots of people died as a result of that. And all of the states that followed my advice, all the Republican states anyway, had better survival rates with no lockdowns than the bluest of the blue states did with their severe lockdowns. New York and California killed hundreds of thousands of people because of your politics. And I think the American people deserve some answers to this, since the incoming catastrophe happened on my watch, and the recovery, slow as it was, happened on your watch. It seems a little disingenuous to say that this whole thing was my fault, when in point of fact, here's what we found out to be true after the fact. Lockdowns didn't work. Masks really had no effect. All of the totalitarian measures to take away freedoms that you put in place, that's because it's your natural reaction to things, because that's just how you think, that's who you are, it's your identity. All of those things turned out to be wrong. All of the things that independent people who are thinking about things, looking at actual statistics, taking a genuine look at what is the chance of my 10-year-old child getting sick and dying from this virus, 0. So, okay, lock down schools for 2 years, put kids in masks for 2 years, slow down their development. Some studies have said this is going to cost them 8 to 10 IQ points, this lack of having facial contact for 2 years because of your policies. Miss Vice President, Madam Vice President, whatever. You know, I would go there, and I would stay there. I would go right at the jobs things, and I would go at the Abraham Accords, and you know, again, I don't know why Donald Trump is not afraid of anything. He's certainly got just tons of courage. He may even have more courage than I do, for God's sake. Thank you for that super chat, by the way. Very, very much there. Is that a bad weather biker? I fully support Trump, Vance, but watched Lee Friedman. I got to read this. I'm sorry. It's getting worse, and it's not going to get better. Let me see here. But watched Lex Friedman interview Vivek, and man, Gibbon has some great ideas on getting back to the founding fathers' vision. We missed an opportunity not giving Ramaswamy more of a chance. Well, he had a chance. I agree with you, though. I think he was very smart when he realized it wasn't going to happen to be the first person to kind of jump enthusiastically on the Trump bandwagon. As I recall, that was the first real recommendation that Trump got. Did I cut myself shaving or another surgery get my lip? No, sometimes it just gets aggravated. It's scar tissue. And sometimes it just gets red. I've asked the dermatologist about this. He said, no, they definitely got all of it. I might have to do some cosmetic fillers or something. Probably just my lipstick needs touching up. Now Eric says Vivek for chief of staff. That'd be great. There's a number of great places you can put. We got a really good bench. You know, there's a great place for Vivek. There's a great place for Ben Carson. There's a great place for, although you haven't heard much about Ben Carson lately. There's a great place for Tulsi Gabbard. There's a great place for Carrie Lake. You know, and and I just get very, very hopeful when he starts banding around when the former president and hopefully the next president starts banding around ideas of having Elon freaking Musk, you know, audit the government. That gives me a thrill up my leg. That's almost as good as having finally pressed pleats in your jeans. Keep Tulsi away from anything related to the Second Amendment. Yes, she'd be an interesting defense secretary. And she'd also be an interesting chief of staff of the Army, or secretary of the. There's no secretary of the Army, obviously, but you get the idea. There's a lot of people out there. It is a Prussian dueling scar, Fiery Texas. It was a nick. You should have seen the other guy. Put a gigantic W on just straight across his face, which was hard because it took 6 people to hold him steady while I carved that in there with my rapier. That looks tough. Yeah. Which side? I guess I got a sneer on the non-scar side. Wah, wah, wah. Cummins is not a fan of Tulsi. That's okay. It's a big tent, and there's lots of jobs. And frankly, I'm not comparing her to Reagan. I'm comparing her to the likes of Buttigieg and our current Attorney General and our current Homeland Security Chief. Those are the people I'm saying she might do a good job with. Don't do those beady eyes. If I only had a cheroot, a thin cheroot. I've never had a cheroot. Roadrunner asked, did Scott grow a beard because of a scar on his face? No, I don't know. Scott is often watching the Stratosphere Lounge. I don't know if he's watching now. So I'm expecting that he probably is watching now, so I'll just go ahead and say that he grew that beard because of a scar on his soul. Scotty, as a friend, dude, please, we gotta trim that thing, man. People are not even listening to the shows anymore. They're just watching the beard move. But you know what? None of my business. I don't have a dress code here at BillWhittle.com. He is a free and sovereign citizen. He's playing Santa. It's what did Zach Galifianakis refer to David Letterman as? Crystal meth Santa Claus, I think. So no, no, it's not that Scott lost a bet. I think he's enamored with it. I noticed the waxy curve to the mustache, which is a look. When Scott first got the beard and he had it trimmed close like Grant, like President Grant. When Grant had a shovel beard at the beginning of the war, and it got to be too much trouble. When Grant got down to serious business, he clipped that baby close. And when it's clipped close, Scott looks like a 1980s, 1970s network television detective. It's a good look. Casey Fluckinger for the super chat. I can verify with my own eyes and proof the manager of the printing house that Venezuela is sending an invading hostile alien force with explicit instructions on obtaining ID. Saying publicly makes me fear for my safety. Well, Casey, I can certainly understand your concerns. I'll say it publicly with a somewhat larger audience. I haven't got the slightest doubt whatsoever that there's armies of people coming in here with orders to get IDs in order to vote certain ways and all the rest of it. And this is, this is the real threat. Fortunately, well, I'm looking at the electoral map, right? So where are you going to get that influx of illegal aliens? They're generally going to be in southern states. Florida is locked red. Texas is locked red. California is locked blue. I think the only place it might really matter is in Arizona, because I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm just saying where is it going to have a change? Where is it going to have an effect? I said this before. I've been saying it since 2020. If Donald Trump wins this thing, if he does, I would rather have I'd rather have the electoral system fixed than the border wall. Much rather. I'm not saying we couldn't do both, but if we can't rely on the boat anymore, and I'm at that point now, then it's not a question of the end of the country. I've actually just, it's I don't know. Its last trip to Idaho was cemented some things that have been going through my head. I don't believe they can kill this country. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying this. I believe they can destroy the government. I believe they can, essentially wipe out another generation of children with their sexuality lecturing and their communist indoctrination, and I believe they can do all kinds of harm and damage. I've never said that they couldn't do those things, but the more I look at the heart of the country, and the more I look at the there's a different metric I use too. I don't think they can destroy this country. In fact, I know they can't. It's too strong. It's too sacred. I'm become more convinced every day it's put here by God, and God doesn't make mistakes, and so, okay, they're going to do some more damage one way or another, depending on who wins. It's going to be a lot more damage or a little more damage before things get turned around, but they will turn around. And the reason I know that they will turn around is because what they are providing is not only not selling, it's not sustainable. They just simply, things cannot go the way they go on. You can't keep spending money you don't have. Everybody knows this. Sooner or later, the walls of the Tower of Barad-dûr is going to fall. We're gonna watch it. Eric Blake says, a simple fact, Bill. It's a simple fact to Eric because he's got the big brain up there, is that the Civil War has already begun. Yes, the sneak attack on the Civil War was on first Tuesday in November in 2020. That was a sneak attack. And he could picture 5 scenarios, and only one does the left win if the military sides with them, and he found that unlikely. I'm sorry, I got those two mixed up. Biden was able to get away with 2020 because he always pulled over Trump that year? You mean pulled over? Yeah, I guess you mean pulled over. The polls being within the margin of error makes it much harder to get away with it. But Castellan says, I saw a historian on YouTube who said the Civil War has already begun, and he could picture 5 scenarios, and only in one does the left win, and that's if the military sides with them, and he found that unlikely. I find it unlikely too, because even if the military sides with them, which they won't, we see examples. For example, we did this thing on petty officers on that right angle a couple weeks ago about just general corruption among the ranks. It's something to be worried about, but it's also one ship, and it's one crappy little ship. It's a littoral combat ship, little crappy ship. I understand that the readiness, and the people are saying that the number of helicopters that were damaged or destroyed by Hurricane Helene is essentially being kept secret and is shocking. I don't doubt that in the slightest. I heard that the readiness of things like military helicopters, just the overall readiness, the percentage of flyable machines at any given time is shockingly low. I don't doubt any of this. I'm not being Pollyanna about this. I'm not being I'm not being unrealistic about it. I've been fighting. I've been doing this since 2003, the last month of 2002. So I had 2003. So I had 5 years of Bush to defend, which wasn't easy. Then I had 8 years of Obama. Then 6 years on playing offense, I guess you could say, and then another 4 years on defense. And throughout all of this, I keep expecting the worst, and I just don't think they can do it. And like I said, they can't do it because I've mentioned this before, but it bears mentioning again for those of you out there who are worried about the results of the election. I am too, But regardless of how it goes, let's say it goes the wrong way. These people are not willing to die for what they believe in, and we are. And plus, we have the guns. To me, that's overwhelming. With one caveat, and that is, as I've said before, they're not coming for your guns, they're coming for your kids. They're not going to come and take your guns because they know if they do that, that's going to start an actual shooting war, which they're not going to win. That's why we've got the guns. The guns are doing their job. The guns are protecting themselves. The threat of the guns in the closet, 350 million or some whatever it is now, or more, was probably more like 500 million handguns in this country. Okay, or weapons, but firearms, I should say. Okay, so they're not coming for those. The guns are working. They're protecting themselves. They're protecting them and us from people with guns. But they are trying to come after your kids. Their strategy is to get you, not to come after your guns, but to take your kids in and make sure that your kids will turn your guns in for them. Let your kids grow up. When you're in your 70s or 80s and your kids are in their 20s or 30s or 40s or whatever, they will turn in the guns in order to get a better social credit score. That's the strategy that the left is using. They're not idiots. They're just evil and stupid. But they're not idiots. They're stupid, but they're not idiots. How does that make sense? Well, they can't see the big picture. They have a very active sense of cunning and deception and ruthlessness, all of which are effective in the short term, but they don't see the big picture. Now, the reason I'm not afraid of losing the country, I'll tell you what would scare me more than losing the election. What would scare me more than losing the election would be if they were selling out of Rey Skywalker action figures. If the Acolyte was being renewed for 5 seasons because it was the most popular show on television. If the Marvels or Captain Marvel utterly eclipsed Deadpool and Wolverine. If those things were happening, then I'd be scared stiff. But they're not. They're not happening. In other words, no one's buying their future. They've taken over the institutions, and no one's buying their future. People just don't want it. So they're not even taking over the hearts and minds of young people. And people are getting tired of this perpetual whining. As they get older, Greta Thunberg, what did somebody call her? Creepy little doom goblin, I think, something like that. Boy, that's perfect. But yeah, she's Greta has been doing this for how many years now? 5, 6 years now? She's chanting about how Palestine is going to be part of the war on the climate and all of it. And there's going to come a point when she's going to realize that she can talk all she wants to, but New York City's still dry. You're still not. You don't need galoshes to walk down the streets of New York because of the rising sea levels. Sooner or later, this shocking realization is going to come to people. This is why I'm not terribly alarmed by these things. An intelligent scientist could have my attention and even my proscribed support if somebody were telling me that we're seeing warming on a rapidity that we've never seen before. But no one's saying we're getting to a point where we've never been before. We've been at 3,000 parts carbon dioxide before, and down to 150. I'm not worried about this. This doesn't scare me. It doesn't scare me at all. But at some point, the people who are sure that the planet is dying, they're going to have to face the sad fact that the planet is as healthy as it's ever been in my lifetime, certainly. My dad died in 2002. He said he'd never seen so many deer in his life as he did in his final year. He lived in Phoenixville, just outside of Valley Forge. He said he'd never seen so many trees before. Burt Rutan shows slides from when he went to Oshkosh the first time 45 years ago, and the ground is just brown. Now everything's green. It's green with just grass and trees, and there's a little extra carbon dioxide, and the plants are loving it. So all of this stuff, right, all of this gloom and doom, and it's like, oh, the country's going to go, we've lost the country, the republic is, no, we haven't. We've lost the government, but the government is an out-of-control thing anyway. It's just like it's not even a dinosaur. It's a runaway locomotive. It's going to go off the rails as it exists in its present form, and then when it's over, when that shadow of what not a shadow, the actual government is a shadow of what the state is, but it'll sort itself out. You can't kill this country. You just can't. I've noticed that the level of tension, racial tension on the national stage and with spokespeople and in riots and stuff has never been higher. But I also notice that when I go to the elevator and I hold the door for a black man or a black man holds the door for me, we both say, hey, how you doing? Thanks very much. That hasn't changed. There's armies of homeless people and crazy people on the streets here in Los Angeles and around the entire country in big cities. That wasn't that way before. That's a problem. That's something to be worried about. But it's not an existential threat. When are people going to get tired enough about this to do something about it? I'll tell you one, honestly, I hate to keep coming back to this place because it paints me as much more misogynistic than I really am. But honestly, so much of this is caused by this kind of radical feminism. I mean, really, you can tie so much of this back to that. This whole bots thing, this brides of the state thing, these very, very unhappy single women who are dependent on government for everything. They are getting older, and they are finding out that it turns out that fish need bicycles after all, and they're not making entire armies of new feminists. They're just not. By the way, somebody, Eric Blake said drink, so I must have hit some score on the Stratosphere Lounge bingo card. But I did see a comment that really rang me like a bell. It really, really, really. So every now and then I'll see one sentence or something that just goes bong, and I just go, whoa, that's it. So get your cards out, get your shot glasses out. But somebody was saying it was in a police body cam video, and somebody said the reason that so many of us are hooked on these things is because we have a yearning for justice. And I thought, wow, that's exactly what it is. That's why I watch these things. I like watching people who think they're above the law get arrested. It makes me happy. It actually makes me happy. I feel a sense of existential joy watching people who think they're above the law. You're under arrest. No, I'm not. I'm not under arrest. Turns out you are. I like seeing the wrecking ball of reality just coming straight at the camera like that. I love people saying things like, you can't do that. That's illegal. You're violating my rights. I'm going to call my lawyer. No, you're not. I'm going to sue all of you. I'm going to take this department down. No, no, you're not. You're nothing. You're nothing. You're just a bunch of pigs. You make $16 an hour. You're nothing. You're the one in the back seat of the police car. You're the one inside the jail, not them. Every time I see how this generation of grown children who did not ask to raise themselves, I have to keep pointing out, every time I see them get their comeuppance, it's like, maybe another soul has come to Jesus, you know? I know that I didn't mean that to sound as flip as it did. I didn't mean it to sound as disrespectful as it did, but that's kind of what I think watching these things. Maybe somebody here just had their first lesson in no. And of all of the statements and all of the slogans and all of the expressions and the changes in the language and new words, new phrases, constantly entering the language, all of this stuff happening all the time, right? The one thing that I think is the most important addition to the language in the last 2 or 3 years that it's been around is well, just since I have a family audience here, is fool around and find out. I think fool around and find out is the greatest expression I've ever heard. This is my entire life philosophy now. Is hey, fool around, find out. The more you fool around, the more you're going to find out. And fool around and find out is essentially, should be what's on, should be on our money. You know, it's the conservative mantra. It's what conservatism is. You can basically take all political theory and munch it all on down, and you say, what is it about conservatism? Explain it to me in one sentence. Tell me one sentence what conservatism is, and I'd say, okay, sure. Conservatism is fool around and find out. That's it. You got it. Fool around and find out. In other words, do what you want to. Have a good time. Live your life. Be who you want to be. Do your own thing, man. You know? But don't force it on people who are not in the mood for it, because if you do, then you start to fool around. And when you start fooling around, then you're going to find out. Justin Cameron with a $10 super chat says, not only do the fish realize they need bicycles, they realize that they really, really, really want one too. Yes, and I've noticed that they don't know how to assemble one, and they don't know how to maintain one. And if you'll pardon the double entendre, many modern fish don't know how to ride a bicycle. They really don't. They don't have the first idea about how to deal with men. They just clueless. And our friend Roadrunner with another super chat. Bill, is there any chance that you will say anything about Major Mace Mattingly, the colony's story mechanics, or at some other non-political subject? Thanks. Yes, of course, Roadrunner, and I'll do that on Monday night. I do my best. I often cross the streams here, which I try not to do, but that's certainly a story for Monday night. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, fool around and find out. Eric says I'm going to bring up Kevin. I know it. I don't know which Kevin we're talking about. Are we talking about Kevin Sorbo? It's the only Kevin I think I'm aware of. I think I know pretty much it. Oh my gosh, well, of course I know this. Darth Chuck the Merciless, I have a Cozy Mark IV. Build a friend in Israel who has had to take cover several times in this last week. Well, that's another reason why they're never going to beat us. Because we build our own airplanes, man. We build in our garages. We build airplanes that not only fly, but they fly better than the Cessnas that come certified out of the factory. Bert watches this show relatively frequently. It's a difficult thing to see the pain on that man's face when he talks about the number of people that have been killed in badly designed airplanes, like a Baron, for example, Beech Baron. It's a twin-engine. Those of you ever remember, and I was very, very, very young, remember Sky King? I think he was flying a Baron. But a Baron is a twin-engine, piston-driven airplane, one engine on each wing, and it's a light twin. And if you lose an engine in a Baron, then the other engine is there to fly you to the scene of the crash. And Bert designed an airplane called the Boomerang, which is probably the most Bert that a Bert airplane has ever been. The Boomerang is, yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Let me show you the Boomerang. You ain't seen nothing like it before. I'm relatively sure about that. So, twin engine airplane has got an advantage, and the advantage is if you lose one engine, you have another engine. That's a good thing to have. Twin engine's a good idea. But on the Baron, because of the design and the stall characteristics and all the rest of it, if you lose an engine on a Baron, you're not going to have a good day. Here's a Baron. Let me drag this baby in here. So Bert said, how about we design an airplane that doesn't stall? In other words, you lose the engine, it doesn't stall. It can't. It's not capable of stalling. It's physically impossible to stall the airplane. You can't spin it either. If you lose one engine, the other engine will fly you to the airport instead of to the scene of the crash. What would that look like? What's the most efficient way to do this? Not the most significant way or the most simple way, it is the most simple way as it turns out. But let's just stop thinking about what airplanes look like now and what they should look like instead. That's basically Bert, is let's stop thinking about what they look like now and let's think about what they would look like if they were designed better. And they would look like this. Come on. How does that get to be so small? Hang on a second. Sorry about that. I took a copy of the thing, but it was a tiny little copy. Let me go here. Come on, I gotta get here's the thing about the boomerang, you gotta get a boomerang angle. Because if you don't really get a boomerang angle, it doesn't count. Well, there's pictures of AirVenture in 2024, and there's a picture of the Beach Starship, yeah, the Beach Starship arriving, and I'm in that picture, although you can't see my face. There's a model boomerang. Bert, have you seen this? There's a scale RC model of the boomerang. It looks great. I'd show it, but it's a video. Come on, I know you got. There you go. There's my picture. That's what I'm looking for. So here's a twin engine airplane that doesn't stall and doesn't kill its pilots, and is not only asymmetrical, but is asymmetrical in virtually every direction. It's longitudinally asymmetrical, laterally asymmetrical. It's just plain asymmetrical. Hang on there, YouTube. This is a Rutan boomerang. It's an amazing airplane. Fast, reliable, safe, and who thinks of this? Nobody thinks of this. This is my entry form for the Bert Rutan is the most originally gifted airplane designer in history of the world. It doesn't look like anything else. There's nothing else like it. Nothing he designs looks like anything else. It's a beautiful, beautiful airplane, and I've not flown in it, but I've touched it, and it's real. I don't know why I brought the boomerang up, other than to say, oh, I remember, because we build airplanes in our garages. That's what conservatives do. We build airplanes, aircraft. Thanks, I hate it. That's okay. You don't have to like it. Some people think it's pretty. Some people think it's appallingly ugly. It's still the safest way to go from here to there on piston-powered engines, and I think it's a monster. I think it's wicked cool. Anyway, so that's that. I think the thing to do now will be to get to the questions, because that's what you're all interested in. I know how this works. I'm going to leave this window open because I got to show Bert this scale boomerang. It's mind-boggling how cool it is. It's just beautiful. I'm sure somebody sent it to him already. I can't imagine that they haven't, but we'll see. Okay. It looks like IT Gurk. Gurk. I always hate getting names wrong because I occasionally get my name wrong when I chime in on somebody else's speed. But for a super chat here, says, my father flew B-24s in World War II. He's a lifelong Democrat. He says he still doesn't like Trump, but he would follow him. And that's enough. Over 100 and voting Republican for the first time. Wow. Wow. Well, you tell your dad for me, for what it's worth, that we're real proud of him, and that the Liberator didn't get the publicity that she deserved. Um, Superior to the Flying Fortress in many ways, and anybody who's a B-24 pilot, or any pilot, anybody who served in the military, um, is a friend of mine. So thank you for that super chat, and congratulations to your dad, and I came late to the party too. Well, that's a cool name. Rad Robot said, looks like you look, talking about the boomerang, says, look like you asked AI to draw an airplane. It has that kind of otherworldliness quality to it. Rocketman wants to know about DCS. I am unable to DCS until I get some more PROGRESS done on the other things, but it is in the cards, waiting patiently, so sorry about the false start. All right. Let's see. Questions. That's what we're about to do. Boy, I say boy. You had 4 mint juleps and you still held the floor. Held the floor. Son, I couldn't get up off it. That's comedy right there. Yes, and I got your email, Rocket Man. I'm sorry I didn't reply to it. I just haven't been able to get it started, although I do have the cool looking skins, man. So that always goes a long way. Here it comes. Here's that pictures of that Bill Whittle guy. Oh, I did my PragerU video was released on Lyndon Johnson and the Vietnam War. And man, I was 12 pounds heavier than I am now, and I look like I was 25 pounds heavier than I am now. I still have another 12 to go, but boy, oh boy, I look pie face in that. Alapco92 says, Bill, that plane looks like the Blome and Voss BV-141. The Germans already did that. Plus, you missed my 2 non-123 super chats. Well, then I will go back and get them. Because I don't like doing that. That's ungrateful looking, and ingratitude is a horrible trait, and I certainly don't want to appear that way. Here's one from Lapco92. My first 2 elections, I voted for Perot. Looking back, I think the campaign kicked the Uniparty into high gear. The 2000 election was shady with no positive side. 2016 was the only time we had a decent choice. Yeah, I think so too. I couldn't agree more. And a clear choice, you know. I continue to be disappointed by George W. Bush. Although what I'm really saying by that is I continue to be disappointed in myself for not having seen this Uniparty thing earlier. But you know, I should have known better when I learned about you know, Skull and Bones and Bohemian Grove, both of which are real things. I should have taken that more seriously. Mark Dice deserves a lot of credit for speaking out about those things, because both of those societies are real societies where the rich and powerful meet, and they meet in Davos and the World Economic Forum. These are all real things. This is not playtime conspiracy items. But I should have taken that more seriously than I did. And the other super chat was back when we were talking about Kamala and guns and stuff, and how many guns there were in the country. Yeah, this one's worth a lot more than the $5. How could they say that red flag laws work regarding firearms? Kamala has a firearm, and she's obviously got mental issues. Bingo. Any lunatic will have that. Yes, and the Germans did make an asymmetrical airplane like the Boomerang, but that's only because Burt Rutan will eventually invent a time machine and go back in time and surreptitiously design that German airplane before the Boomerang. He actually did design that airplane. I just don't know how he did it yet. Okay, so let's see what we got here. TSL questions for 10-3. That's today. Thank you, Eric, for curating this stream. Appreciate it very much. Let's see what we got. All right, I'll just go through the list. Oh, we have an Eli Noor. Good. Janie Waterman. So good to see you back, Janie. We missed you. Seems like a couple weeks where you were off the radar, and it was a bleak and desperately cold time here. Jacob Belchek, Marisha Dark. Good to see Marisha Dark. Guy Balo, broke college student. Second time asking in big letters, so we'll make sure we get to that one. Texican. Oh, Texican, I'm so sorry, dude. I have been leaving you hanging, and I didn't mean to. I actually had written down on a piece of paper to get back to you about that stuff. Yeah, hang on. I have no excuse other than plead insanity. Got an Eric Blake, got a Charles Tomes. Okay, cool. Let's get through these. You know what? Let me do Texican first because this is wicked cool. He has been helping me, and in a very, very large way helping me with the Major Mace Mattingly thing, and he has he's contributed the mission control panels to. Thank you, Epic Guest, for that $20 super chat with nothing attached to it. Been contributing the mission control panels to the Major Mace Mattingly room, and he's been recently adding stuff, although it's been months and months and months since I worked on it. And this is some of his latest design work for the Major Mace Mattingly. Oops, sorry. Let me just get rid of that guy. Where is it? Is it you? It's you. It's just so cool. Yeah, it's fantastic. Take a look at this. This is for the moon base control room here. I have to shrink it down because it's so awesome. Hang on there. Just hang on 1 second, please. YouTube, I'll get to you in just 1 second. Let me ditch these two here. Goodbye. Yes, I want to delete you too. You, however, I need to shrink down. It's just awesome work, man. It's just cool. It's the whole, you know, I mean, Texican gets the whole Mace Mattingly thing. He gets the whole retro future 1966 man on the moon base, 20 men, 50 men, 60 men on the moon by 1966. So that's pretty cool. Hang on, YouTube, here it comes. This was done by our friend Texican, and he has been he's emailed me a couple of these things, and I get them, and I go, okay, I got to answer that, and then I go off and do some stupid bill thing instead of the right thing, and again, it makes me look like an ingrate, and I don't like that feeling because I'm not, although I sure come off as one sometimes. That's just plain, that's just a bill time issue. I'm sorry to say. It's not an excuse, just an explanation. Hang on. Shrink that baby down again. Isn't this cool looking though? Just love it. And he's also got a diagram of the moon base based on the moon base that I laid out, where you got top-down view and you got all the modules, and there's green lights and red lights and, you know, and conditions lights, and I love these charts and stuff. I think they're fantastic. I think the thing I like about these charts, especially the red one, is it looks like it's difficult, and that's one of the main things I want to accomplish with Major Mace Mattingly. Look how good that control console looks, and the reflection on the glass dials on the left. That's fabulous. One of the things I like most about Mace Mattingly is that these guys are smart. You know, they're doing. I love that line. You know, where he says, you know, if my math is correct, and it is correct, where he's just running statistics in his head. I love it. I love it. So no, I will. You know what? Let me do this because tomorrow's my first like actual free day. I have here my evidence, although you couldn't tell that I mean, I suppose I could have done this while I was putting the poster up. But see, I got a couple other notes on there. But see, it says Mace Mattingly. That was for me to get back in touch with you, and I didn't get it. So I will let me put this someplace where it will not be overlooked. And we'll chat some more tomorrow because I really need to get back into that and have something to show by Monday. Hopefully that'll be great. Vorpal Bunny's Revenge. Speaking of blinking lights, das Computermaschine ist nicht für der Gefingerpoken und Mittengraben. Okay. Let me turn this off here. We'll get to these questions. Thank you for that, Texican. It looks cool, and I need to get it back going because I love those guys. I think they're seriously cool. All right. So back to the top here. Eli Noor. Move these questions over here so that I can keep comments rolling. Okay, here we go from Eli Noor. Thanks in part to the Biden administration's decision to unfreeze $6 billion in Iranian assets. Yeah, that's a good idea. And lift oil sanctions on Iran. Intelligence reports have indicated that Iran is close to developing fully functional nuclear weapons. Great. Likely trying to beat the deadline of a potential Trump election, regardless of the validity of the timeline given in these reports. If the radical Shia Muslims obtain a weapon, can we expect the principle of mutually assured destruction to keep them from using it? Or are they radical enough to target Israel or the United States? Well, that's a very serious question, so let's take that question very seriously. The mullahs are religious fanatics. The Iranian military, which has been at war with the United States since 1979, is actually fairly capable in terms of its officer class and its operational capabilities. It is a, of all of the Islamic armies in the world, I would say the Iranians are the most professional. Now, the good news about nuclear weapons is that it's not, well, first of all, they're hard to manufacture. The Iranians have the technology to do the implosion triggers. That's been made possible by the digital age. For those of you not up on it, let's just kind of take a step back and kind of go to our corners here and regroup. So Iran is essentially refining uranium. Let's make sure if I get this right. Uranium-235 is relatively common, but I think you have to get to 237 or the other way around. I cannot for the life of me remember which of the two, but I think I got it right. Enriched uranium is very dense. It's dense enough so that if you shoot a neutron into it, when you've got enough of it in one place, it's called critical mass. You fire a neutron into that thing, presumably a bunch of neutrons, and they will split these large, unstable atoms. And when they split them, other neutrons come out, and they split other atoms, and they split others, which leads to a chain reaction explosion. If you can keep that chain reaction controlled by inserting graphite, 238 is common, so I got the numbers wrong. 235 is rare. I was wrong about that. But I get, half points for understanding that there's two different uraniums, and I just got them mixed up. Okay, so there's common uranium, and then you have to basically refine this uranium. You have to separate it out because the 235 is extremely rare. And one of the ways you can separate it out is with a centrifuge, a gas centrifuge. And so when we were developing the nuclear weapons for the Manhattan Project, we were making microscopic amounts of this stuff on a daily basis. Oak Ridge Lab at Tennessee, where they refined the uranium, was using 1/6 of all of the electricity in the United States of America in the 1943, 44, 45 period. 1/6 of all of the country's electricity was being generated at Oak Ridge to refine uranium. The Iranians, or the Iranians if you prefer, the Iranians are have a problem, and this is good. They have two problems. One of them is it's hard to make an atom bomb, but it's harder to make a hydrogen bomb. Whenever we talk about nuclear war and, end of the civilization nuclear war, we're talking about thermonuclear war. We're talking about hydrogen weapons, weapons that have megaton, millions of tons of TNT. So whenever you think about Judgment Day or Terminator or The Day After Tomorrow or Threads or any of these nuclear apocalypse movies, every time you see the giant mushroom clouds and entire cities are being destroyed, those are hydrogen weapons. And the good news is that in order to make a hydrogen weapon, you first have to make an atomic weapon. A hydrogen bomb is triggered by an atomic bomb. You use an atomic bomb to compress hydrogen to the point where it fuses into helium, and that releases a lot more energy. A lot more. So the good news is that this uranium-235 that they need is rare. It takes a long time and a lot of energy to make just a little bit of this stuff. So when they say they have nuclear weapon capability, what they're really saying is they've got enough uranium to make a bomb or two or three. Roadrunner says he beat me by a couple of seconds, but I actually beat him because of the lag. I beat you, Roadrunner. I was waiting for you, giving you as much time as I possibly could to say that a thermonuclear weapon has an atomic bomb for a trigger. So, if it turns out that Iran declares that they're a nuclear power, that they have the ability to make nuclear weapons, then they have the ability to make an atomic bomb, not a hydrogen bomb. Now, an atomic bomb is still ruin your whole day, but we have grown up under the shadow of thermonuclear weapons. And so when we talk about atomic bombs, not hydrogen bombs, fission weapons, not fusion weapons, we need to scale down our expectations. For example, if you took the Hiroshima bomb and put it at the center of that, that archway, kind of iconic restaurant at the center of LAX airport, if you put the Hiroshima bomb at the center of LAX airport, the fatal blast radius of that bomb stays within the airport boundaries. Everybody understand what I just said there? If you take the Hiroshima bomb, put it in the middle of LAX, the fatal blast radius is inside the airport. It's not the whole city gone, it's inside the airport. Now, if you happen to be inside LAX at the time that happens, you're not going to have a good day. But it is not the kind of civilization-ending, city-destroying weapons that we have come to believe. Hiroshima was a target that was selected because it had not been targeted before. But the number of people killed in Hiroshima was probably 2/3 the number killed 5 months earlier when they first firebombed Tokyo. There were 100,000 people died in that raid. 120,000 people burned to death in the firebombing of Tokyo, which could have been avoided if the Japanese had surrendered, but they didn't surrender, so they kept on fighting. In fact, they kept on fighting harder and harder and harder, so that's what happens when you start a war with people who are determined to finish a war. So, if Iran were to say we're an atomic power, would that mean we're an atomic power with one bomb? We're an atomic power with 3 bombs, 5 bombs? They're not going to have 200 bombs. Israel has 200. They're much smarter, and they've been working on this for a much longer time. They're not acknowledging that they have 200, but that's the general consensus, and it seems about reasonable to me. So, the problem, of course, is that Israel is so remarkably small a country that 2 or 3 atomic weapons will do an awful lot of damage. One of the things that protects, I hadn't thought about this until this very second, one of the things that protects Israel from atomic attack is, if you're going to use atomic weapons on Israel, there are essentially only 2 targets worthy of an atomic weapon, and that is Tel Aviv and the other one is Jerusalem. Now, I don't think they'd hesitate for a second to drop a nuclear weapon on Tel Aviv, But if the Iranians were to drop an atomic weapon on Jerusalem, that is a big problem. In fact, it's such a big problem, I cannot imagine it. I cannot believe that it has taken me this long to realize that Jerusalem is probably essentially safe from nuclear attack because there are so many Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem. It's impossible to imagine Iran nuking Jerusalem. The Muslims are maintaining that Jerusalem still belongs to them. And if you're a Jew or an American Jew, you might want to remember it was Donald Trump who moved the embassy. Rather, it was Donald Trump who recognized the Israelis moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem as their capital. So, really, worst realistic possible case is they get a nuclear weapon in Tel Aviv, and an atomic bomb in Tel Aviv would essentially destroy Tel Aviv. It's not a gigantic, huge city. You could drop, well, like I said, if you've ever been to Los Angeles and you've seen how big Los Angeles isn't really even a city. What we call Los Angeles is essentially 80 little towns that are strung together next to each other. It's like a quilt. There's Santa Monica, Culver City, there's Pacific Palisades, there's Malibu, and then you come inland and you get over to the valley and you get to Sherman Oaks, you get to North Hollywood, there's Van Nuys, there's Thousand Oaks, there's Tarzana, there's Encino. It's just this massive quilt. But Tel Aviv is fairly compact, and an atomic attack on Tel Aviv would be horrific. And because Israel is so small, you've got fallout to think about, and the fact that the country is so tiny that even I just want to be crystal clear about this. If the Iranians have a nuclear weapon, it will be a tiny nuclear weapon by the standards of nuclear weapons. It'd probably be a 10 to 20 kiloton bomb, probably would be in that vicinity. So would they use it? I don't know. I think that their best use of it would be to prevent. Israel is so many orders of magnitude more capable than Iran. Iran launched 400 missiles, and back in, what was it, April, they launched another 300 or 400, and half of them fell into the ocean. We shot down most of them. Some 7-8% got through, something like that. Look, if you happen to be standing underneath one of those, it's not really great. But if I'm Iran, the reason I want a nuclear weapon is to use it as a defense against Israel coming in conventionally attacking me and knocking my regime out of power. That's the other thing you need to understand about Iran as well. It's not just pressure from Israel and the rest of the world and the United States. They're under tremendous pressure from below. That's why they launched this attack. They had to do something to show their own people that they were not impotent after Israel basically took out Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis with our help. So we are, the Darth Chuck says the U.S. Navy intercepted a few of those things, and we can intercept more than a few. I think we ought to take, if Iran announces that it's nuclear capable, then we ought to take, I don't know what is a good number, let's say 15 or 20 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, park them in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea or the Red Sea, and just leave them there to shoot down incoming missiles, because our destroyers are really, really good at that. And these are not point defenses either. We can intercept these things if they launch it on a missile. If they decide to bring it in, people think it's smuggle a nuclear weapon into a city. It's just as easy as smuggling in a pizza. It's not. We have the United States, and if the United States has it, then I can assure you Israel has them as well. We have extraordinarily sophisticated radiation monitoring stations around the world. If somebody's trying to sneak a nuke around the Horn of Africa, we know it. So it's not the kind of thing that can be done easily. But I guess I can answer your question as simply as this, Eli. First of all, if Iran has a limited number of weapons, they're not going to use them on the United States. They're going to use them against Israel, because they can cripple Israel with a nuclear attack. They can only piss off America, really piss us off the way we haven't been pissed off since August of 1945, and they don't get any advantage out of that. If they decide that they're going to use them against Israel, then they have the backing of the rest of the lunatics in the Arab world. But if they use them against us, there's not going to be anything left of them. If they use them against Israel, there's not going to be anything left of them either. So I think most of this is just saber waving, saber rattling, and I think a lot of it is national pride, and I think they really want to have a nuclear weapon so that they can basically have a deterrent against Israel, because Israel can wipe Iran off the face of the earth many times over. But if Iran has a nuclear weapon, then they can do the same to Israel one time over, and one time is enough. I don't fear a nuclear attack from Iran in the United States. I don't see how they'd pull it off. They can't ship it over here. They can't really fly it over here. This idea that you can just put them in a suitcase and just walk around with them is, we also have, both with the United States and Israel notably, the two most sophisticated intelligence gathering services in the world. And it's not like we don't know where this uranium is or where it's going. We probably know about as much as of their nuclear program as they do. The Israelis did something absolutely brilliant when they were dealing with the Iranians earlier. I want to say it was about a decade ago now, something like that, maybe a little less. What they did were they were able to infiltrate the computers that ran the centrifuges. The centrifuges are what's spinning out the uranium-235 from the 238. That's what separates out the highly radioactive weapons grade uranium from the much more common uranium-238. And these centrifuges have to run at a very, very, very precise speed. And what the Iranians did was they were able to infiltrate the Iranian lab with a thumb drive that they just left hanging around, put it on a bunch of thumb drives, and somebody said, "Oh, look, a free thumb drive." Some Iranian took it to the lab, plugged it into his computer, got into the system, and instead of shutting down the centrifuges, what it did was it made them run just slightly bit slower, slightly bit faster. And they didn't know why. They couldn't figure out why their centrifuges were speeding up and slowing down, and if it speeds up a little bit or slows down a little bit, then it doesn't work. And so instead of just shutting them down, which is what a second-rate intelligence would have done, first-rate intelligence was they kept them running and kept the Iranians guessing for years and years and years. Couldn't understand why these centrifuges were doing this. Well, they put a worm in there, cyber worm. So this is who they're dealing with, I was glad when I wasn't happy that they launched the attack, but when they launched the attack, I was happy that the weapons were coming from Iran and not coming from Gaza or coming from Lebanon or, it should just be Israel should just declare war on Iran. Iran has already declared war on Israel and the United States. They declared war on us since the inception in 1979. They've been at war with us since 1979. So, Steve Whoop, I hadn't seen this before. It's probably widely, commonly talked about now, but the Palestinian supporters were always chanting "from the river to the seas," and Steve Whoop is talking about these exploding pagers, and he wrote "from the liver to the knees," and all parts in between. So, Bill Whittle is declaring war is so passé. Nobody does that anymore. Well, I think they should, and I think we should too. Of the 4,000 plus people we lost in Iraq, and in Afghanistan, most of them were lost to IEDs, and these IEDs were designed, built, and in some cases installed by Iran. So they got it coming. That's that. So I hope that covered most of it for you, Eli. Janie Waterman. Hello, I was happy to hear on Monday that Bean is doing well. Give him a face rub for me. Thank you. Bean is my cat with diabetes. He has episodes every now and then they're terrifying to watch because he's just completely lost. He just scans his head back and forth. Sometimes he goes all the way flat on his stomach like this. It's hard to watch. But every time he goes through, when it comes through on the other side, I get a little more used to it. But by and large, little Bean is doing great. He's a good bean. And I got to bring him in here so you can see him. He's a one-tooth tiger. He's got one tooth left. He's got this tooth down here. Everything else is gone. He had bad teeth when I got him from the animal shelter back in 2010. Yeah, I think it was 2011. He's a good bean. Not named for Alan Bean. No. He's just I don't know. I call him Bean. Sometimes I call him Peanut, and sometimes I call him Peanut Bean, because he's just a little bean is why. And he's a good boy. He's a gray tuxedo, long hair. He's a neat cat. So thank you for asking, Jenny. He's doing fine. Thank you. I will give him a face rub for you. Eli's question reminded me of one of my own. The mass said the likelihood of atomic bomb atmospheric ignition was near zero. This was brought up in the Oppenheimer movie. When they detonated the bomb, they were Heller. I think it was Heller. Joseph Heller did the calculations and said there's a possibility that if we start this chain reaction, it's going to continue on past the uranium and start to cause a chain reaction. It's going to cause the atmosphere to essentially catch fire. I don't know what Bean weighs. He's probably I don't know. I want to say he's 20-some pounds, something like that. He was very thin when we took him in because he was losing weight and he was getting kind of bony, and they said, well, your cat's got diabetes. That was 7-8 years ago. That's thousands of shots he gets 2 shots a day from me. It's a good boy. Back to the question here. Since we've now detonated 3 A bombs and an H bomb without atmospheric ignition, have we proved the likelihood is actually zero every time, or with the likelihood of near zero renewed every time we would detonate another bomb? Could that be one of the reasons we haven't done it again? I'd like to think it's because we truly value our fellow humans' lives, but there are plenty of signs to the contrary. Thank you. Well, Janie, I have some fun news for you. Which country if I were to ask the person on the street which country has suffered the most nuclear weapons detonated over its soil, almost everybody would say Japan. Yeah, we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. But that's not the answer that wins. The country that's had the most atomic bombs dropped on it is the United States of America, and we have dropped 1,000 nuclear weapons above ground testing and another 1,000 below ground. 1,000 nuclear bombs have been tested in the atmosphere above the United States out in Nevada. 1,000. 1,000. Yep. So I think at this point we can safely say that the threat of atmospheric ignition was a potential was a mystery that was resolved with the first atomic test. And even then, when they said the chances were near zero, it was in fact very, very nearly zero. Steve Whip points out, easy, look north of Pahrump, Nevada. Lady Jane says, how did I not know this? Many people don't know this. This is why so many people are so terrified of nuclear war. And I say, listen, I'm not saying a nuclear weapon is something that you should be playing around with, and it's not something to be taken seriously. But the country that's dropped the most nuclear weapons is the United States. We dropped 1,000 nuclear weapons, and we dropped 1,000 nuclear weapons on ourselves. As far as I know, those were all atomic weapons. I don't believe we've dropped a hydrogen weapon on the United States, but we have dropped hydrogen. We have detonated hydrogen weapons in Bikini Atoll and other atolls out in the middle of the Pacific. That's where we put the big boys. Chuck the Merciless did beat me with that one. In fact, Jenny, you'll get a kick out of this. They were testing them just north of Vegas, and during the 50s and I guess into the 60s, they would make an announcement at the casinos. They would say, ladies and gentlemen, sorry to interrupt your gaming, but if you're curious about these kind of things, if you'd like to step outside, there'll be a nuclear test in the north in about 5 minutes. You might want to step outside and get a quick look at that. And people would walk out of the casinos, and they just stand there in the middle of the 100-degree sun, and then they'd watch the 105-degree temperature go to, 4.5 million degrees very briefly. We had an atomic cannon Uh, how many has Russia tested? I don't know. It's hundreds. They tended to test way up north, way up north. That's where they dropped Tsar Bomba, up in the, what is that island chain? There are islands in the far, far north of Russia, well above the Arctic Circle. And that's where they dropped the largest bomb ever. It was a 50 megaton bomb. Janie says it's a tourist attraction. It was. I would love to have seen one, man. I really, really would love to have seen one. And now there is apparently some evidence. Novaya Zemlya, thank you. That's a gigantic island north of Russia. Well, it's part of Russia, north of mainland Russia. Yeah, Tsar Bomba was 50 megatons. Could have gone to 100 megatons, but they decided to walk it down a little bit. Now, Tsar Bomba, on the other hand, you detonate Tsar Bomba over Los Angeles, that's something you would be aware of. But here in my position in Sherman Oaks, you could detonate a nuclear weapon at LAX, and I don't think I would know it. I really don't think I'd know it. It would be a sound like a thunderclap, like a sonic boom or something, but, you know. So we had atomic cannons, which is really fun to watch because these guys just got this big giant piece of artillery. They just pull the lanyard, and you sit and you wait 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 and you wait. And way down there on the desert floor, it's little 10 kiloton or something like that. Some of the guys who were in the very first tests, you can occasionally see. By the way, this is a great channel you might want to look up on YouTube. There's a channel on YouTube called Atomic Cafe, and they've got all of the test footage. The most spectacular nuclear footage is we detonated a couple of nuclear weapons in outer space, and they look like giant flowers. They're just gorgeous. It's like somebody just shattered crystal, just goes beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Yeah, so we had a 1,000 above ground and almost another 1,000 below ground. There is an animation out there showing every nuclear weapon as history goes on. It's just a constant timeline, so you're just looking, and it's like there's a flash in New Mexico, and then there's like flash in Japan, and then there's another flash in the I guess where did was it Kwajalein? They did the first test. Kwajalein, Bikini, all those atolls out there. Then flash, then flash, big flash. That's the first hydrogen bomb. Flash, and then it's like flash, and Nevada's just going just testing them. Bill sure loves him some bombs. I do. I don't love the atomic bomb. I'd love to live in a world where we didn't have atomic bombs. No, I take that back. I'm very glad I live in a world where we have atomic bombs. I'd like to live in a world where we didn't need to have atomic bombs. Castle Bravo tests were undersea tests. The first undersea test was an atomic bomb. They did eventually do a hydrogen bomb under the water, which made quite a splash, actually. So there's that. Moving on to Jacob Belchek. Second attempt due to technical difficulties. Yes, I'm sorry about all that. I've been thinking about some of the things you said about the power of social proof. The myths about social proof always show it's a bad thing employed by unscrupulous people in order to push a lie. Are there any examples of positive social proof? Yes, there are many. It seems to me the whole concept is a type of intellectual bullying, and it's difficult to bully someone into a more virtuous position. In a town full of squares, the rebel often finds himself with no shortage of admirers. Why doesn't social proof seem to work both ways? I'll give you an example of positive social proof, Jacob. If you walk someplace, let's say you go into a building, or you're going to a DMB or a football game or a baseball game or something. If there's a lot of people standing in line, then it's usually smart to go stand in that line. That's just a super simple example of social proof. It's often when you arrive on the scene of something where there's something going on, most people will be where the action is. So, that's just a super simple example of social proof. All of the good examples. I'll just give you the first thing that came to my mind. It's rather vulgar, but it's just the first thing that came to my head. One good example of social proof is you don't just crap in the middle of the living room, because nobody else does that either. There's a pretty strong social proof at work there, saying it's not good to just plain walk into somebody's house and just take a crap in the middle of their living room, because nobody else is doing that. That's one of the ways we learn that's not a nice thing to do, which is why, in fact, the social proof against defecating in public is so overwhelmingly profound. It's one of the few things that still shocks us, is seeing humans in places like San Francisco or any other Democrat-run city. When you see somebody, a human being, defecating in public, it's horrific. Horrific. It's revolting. It's revolting even to talk about, and it's a sign that society has not only been chipped away but been destroyed. That there is no civilization there. If people are just crapping in the streets, then that's not civilization anymore. It's not even close. That's a pretty secure bet to take. That if you have to step around human waste in your city is not a city anymore. It's not a civilized city anymore. Third world cities are like this all the time. So hopefully that will give you an idea of all of the examples of social proof. We don't, generally speaking, shouting in a restaurant is another example. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but when you hear people arguing at the top of their lungs in a restaurant, everybody stops and everybody stares and everybody gives you the evil eye, because you're not supposed to do that in public. And that's why, for every time you've ever heard somebody raise their voice in a restaurant, you've been to a restaurant 100 times for every time you've seen somebody making a scene at a restaurant. So that's an example of social proof that works in the positive direction. You can add all of the cues of civilization to that mix, and you end up with millions of items of social proof that steer people towards, usually, at least in this country, steer them towards decent, civilized, friendly behavior. Holding a door for somebody when you go into a 7-Eleven or something. That's a form of social proof. And it works completely to everybody's advantage. It makes everybody grateful and happy instead of resentful and bitter and democratic. Marusha Dark. Oh, Marusha Dark. Okay, here we go. Topic: Assange. I'm going to love this. For a while, I'd always wondered why Trump never pardoned Julian Assange when he had the chance. It seemed like it would be an easy victory, optically and substantially, to win over many on the left who lauded Assange and his call for his release. Instead, he let it lapse and waited until an interview in which Tim Pool practically begged him to do it before he finally seemed to promise action on that front. By this point, he was out of office, and Biden's administration swooped in to cut a deal that ultimately led to Assange being able to come home. Granted, it's not like Biden pardoned him either. Assange was forced to plead guilty to several charges, but for better or worse, he did what Trump failed to do. In a recent interview this week, Assange testified that it was the CIA under Mike Pompeo that reopened the charges against him, that Obama declined to pursue, and moreover, that Pompeo and the CIA tried to torture and assassinate him. That's an allegation, but that doesn't mean it's not true. Not saying this changes anything at a macro level about Biden, Trump, or Obama in terms of the upcoming election, but it might certainly explain why the Trump administration didn't release Assange if they were actively gunning for him. All I can say is I hope Trump didn't know about this and Pompeo was just another of those bad people he told Bobby Kennedy he felt compelled to appoint. Although if Trump didn't know, that was little comfort, since he certainly should have and is still a black mark on his first term. Any thoughts on this? Full link to Assange's statement here. All right, so let me get into Julian Assange for a second here. I have very mixed feelings about this guy. My strong first reaction is to have a natural, deep-seated antagonism, revulsion, and disgust, and in fact hatred for spies and traitors. People who let me finish. People who release secrets, who've been sworn into programs that are top secret, people who release secrets, I am inclined to despise these people. John Walker comes to mind, who gave the Soviets so much material. We one of the episodes, my favorite episode of the Cold War by far, was Cloaks and Daggers, which was about espionage. And in Cloaks and Daggers, we talked about how the United States built the U-2, we built the SR-71, we built spy satellites that could read a license plate from orbit. We tried to raise, in fact, it did raise a Russian submarine from 16,000 feet below the surface of the ocean. That's much deeper than the Titanic at 12,000 feet. We did all of these things in order to gather intelligence, and the Soviet Union paid John Walker over the course of his lifetime $200,000 and got everything. They got everything. So my initial reaction is that I have a strong inclination to want to see those people punished for violating security protocols if they've been sworn to secrecy in industries of the United States and defense and all the rest of it. Very, very strong. Now, where the situation gets interesting is where you find that the information he's releasing is information where the government is acting not against the Soviets or against the Iranians or anybody else, but acting against its own people. Now my sympathy swings strongly towards Assange. We have not given that up Roadrunner. I don't want to get into that just yet, but that as far as I know, that deal's still on the table. When you're talking about a government that is no longer protecting secrets necessary to protect the American people, but is in fact protecting secrets because it's at war with the American people, now, well, Steve will beat me to it, now he's not a spy or a traitor anymore, now he's a whistleblower. It's an entirely different thing. He can be both, obviously, and I suspect him, in fact, I'm quite convinced he is both. But I am much more concerned about our own government spying on us than I am about the Soviets or the Chinese. So I'm rapidly, and have been rapidly, moving to the position that he should be pardoned, and if there were in fact attempts on his life on the part of government intelligence agencies, not only do those people need to be prosecuted and sent to jail, and persecuted for that matter, but it's yet another indication of how badly out of control our intelligence services are, and an out-of-control domestic intelligence service is a much greater threat than any foreign power that I can think of. Much greater threat. So that's my Assange rant. I support him. I think he should be pardoned. I think he's done more good than harm. But I have a very hard time with people who violate national security concerns. But again, that's the difference between a spy and a traitor and a whistleblower. So Alex Hooper says, I'm at the point of wanting the FBI to be disbanded entirely and started anew. You and me and about 200 million other Americans. I think they need to be scrapped. We need an FBI, and we need a CIA, but this FBI and this CIA we do not need. And I am not only appalled at what I see on the top level, I am genuinely shocked and bitterly disappointed that more of the people who I still consider to be patriotic field agents, I'm still very conflicted why the honest, patriotic members of the FBI and the CIA, which I would assume is most of them, I'm still bitterly disappointed that they didn't simply walk out en masse and simply say, this is not what we signed up for. I had a chance, a gentleman made a large donation to this company back in 2018. I got a chance to go and thank him in person, which was a bit of a trip because he was living in Norway at the time. He was a former CIA agent. He'd been in the CIA for 35 years, 40 years, mostly through the 60s and 70s and into the 80s. And he said he doesn't recognize the organization. He says that the CIA at the time was not allowed to spy on Jane Fonda while she was negotiating to get into North Vietnam. The CIA was not allowed to listen in on that conversation. They had microphones in there, but they weren't allowed to listen because they were not allowed to spy on American citizens. And the way they got around that was her boyfriend at the time, was it the guy who directed, was it Vadim? The way they got around that was that the boyfriend at the time was not a U.S. citizen, so they weren't listening to her; they were listening to him. But the point I'm trying to make here is that this CIA agent was telling me, this is a week or two before he died. That's why I went to see him and thank him, because he told me he had terminal condition. So I went over to shake his hand in person, thank him. But he had no reason to lie about this. He said, we really wanted to listen in, but we couldn't. We were prevented legally from doing it. And so that was an honest CIA. And this one is not, and hasn't been for a long time. And the old school CIA guys, the old company guys, can't believe what they're seeing. And the same goes for the old FBI guys too. I know a high-level field agent in the FBI, and I'm good friends, although I haven't seen him with a while, a guy who was highly placed in the FBI. And they want to tear down the FBI. They're ashamed of what they've done. I've heard a number of FBI agents say that James Comey did more damage to the FBI in the space of a year than the Soviet Union was able to do in the space of 40 years, or 80, or however the hell long the FBI has been around. So there you go. Guy Bala. Hey, Guy. Greetings, Bill. This longshoreman strike brings up the question of what to do about overpowerful unions in general. It seems as a general rule, unions do more harm than good. I personally agree with this. Your mileage may vary. That's a discussion I'm more than willing to have. A prime example is the teachers' unions during the pandemics. The auto workers and the Teamsters have done nothing but cause problems for this country too. There's too much power concentrated in these unions who only care about themselves and don't even think about the rest of the country as a whole. Should they be treated like the monopolies that they are? I think Reagan had the right approach. Workers have the right to strike, but employers have the right to fire them and replace them. Yeah, I agree with that. There was a time when unions were a necessary evil, but that time has passed, and now they're just evil terrorists and should be treated as such. The managers of these companies are not completely blameless either, nor are they as evil as the union leaders would lead you to believe. Thoughts? Great right angle on the longshoreman. Thank you. I used to agree with that wholeheartedly until the pandemic. And when I saw what was going on during the pandemic, I realized that the left-wing criticism against big business is not completely without merit. That was a jagged pill to swallow, because I reflexively defend private enterprise against the government as a alternative. If it comes down to socialism or capitalism or communism, I'm capitalism all the way. But there is an awful lot of shenanigans that goes on inside large businesses. Private enterprise, in terms of small businesses are the best thing that ever happened to the human race. And most of the problems with big business happen once they become too big. Boeing is a perfect example of this. Boeing was run by engineers. It was an engineer company. That's why Boeing aircraft were the safest in the world and had the finest reputation in the world. Then Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas. McDonnell Douglas had a reputation for stripping companies in order to provide more returns for their shareholders. And Boeing had that merger with McDonnell Douglas, and Boeing ingested that poison pill, and now Boeing is garbage. I heard the other day somebody put it brilliantly. They said McDonnell Douglas bought Boeing with Boeing's money. They took it over, even though they were presumably the company being bought. Their management style took over and destroyed what I think was without question. I don't think there's any question about it. The Boeing was the finest engineering company in the history of the world. And then they bought McDonnell Douglas, which never built aircraft that were anywhere near as good as Boeing's aircraft. And they brought with them the management that said, no, it's not about quality, it's about shareholder value. So they bought the culture, and it destroyed them. And they deserve to be destroyed. They're a laughingstock now. Now you go to the airport and people say, if it's Boeing, I'm not going. that happened in 3 years, 3 years. Started with the 737 Max. So it's not that there's no place for unions, because top level management can, in a big company, can get very imperious. But as a general rule, I agree with you completely. I have to say, when they moved to Chicago, yes, that's exactly right. They moved to the most corrupt city in America from Seattle, which they had been with forever. Why would shareholders not prefer to invest in a quality company? Because, Eric, they get a bigger paycheck if they have a company that's they get paid more money, and then they go and invest that money in some other company after Boeing has been destroyed. This is, what's a form of capitalism? It's something like predatory capitalism. That's not the term, but you get the idea. So there are definite problems, and unions can be a counterbalance to this. And I should mention, it's not crony capitalism, it's maybe vulture capitalism, something, that kind of thing. Corporatism, those are all good terms. All right, so there needs to be checks and balances against that. And you have to understand, my dad was a hotel manager, so I've been on the management side of issues the whole time. My dad took very good care of his employees. Some companies do and some companies don't. My dad always, in the hospitality business, in the hotel business, your employees are your number one asset. They're not a liability. That's not something that comes out of a red ink that you have to pay. They're your asset. That's what you're selling. I heard my dad say this 1,000 times. A hotel room is a TV set and a balcony. He said, you go back to a hotel because it makes you feel at home there. You feel like this is your place, and that you've got this place is a place that takes care of you and cares about you, knows you. And that's how he ran his hotels. So he was a great manager, and there was no reason to have a union when you had managers like my dad. But there are other managers who basically say, what is the minimum staff we can do with here? And we're going to provide such crummy service that these people are never going to come back, but we're going to rinse them for so much money that it's just a business decision. Look, it's like the used car salesman that try to sell you the undercoating, right? Oh, we got to get the rust proofing. It's $200. No, you really need to have this. You get the hard sell. The guy doesn't want the rust proofing. He insists on it. Finally, he gets the rust proofing. He says, God damn it, I'm leaving this place. I'm never buying another car here. The person who does the sale says, well, I got the $200 for the rust proofing, so I get another paycheck. But the guy never comes back. A good salesman is the kind of car salesman who says, I'm going to give you the best deal I can because I'd like to be your car salesman for the rest of your life and for your kid's life. That's how quality people work. So, with all that said, I've always found the Teamsters and large unions, big labor, to be not only corrupt but evil. I've always felt of big labor as evil. Just money laundering. And politics. Democratic politics is built around big labor. That's why I found out tonight from this awesome audience of ours that the longshoremen's strike has been postponed until after the election because they don't want it to look bad for Kamala, who's a big union person. The unions and the teachers' unions, they're horrible. I can't stand them. I hate them. The simple answer, in my opinion, to your question is, whether you like them or not, I think from a purely moral point of view, which is how we try to argue things here on this show if we possibly can, from a moral point of view, individual working people have a right to collective bargaining. They have a right to associate and to act as individuals who decide to become collectivized. They have that right. So I have no moral or ethical problems with private unions, because a private union, auto workers union, let's say, can make demands that are so great that it will put the company out of business. And if the company goes out of business, then everybody loses their jobs. So when you've got a union that's dealing with a private organization like General Motors, the union can push for as much as it possibly can get for its workers, but it does understand that it's possible to ask for so much that the company goes out of business, at which point they lose their jobs. Nobody wants to lose their jobs. So that works. What was illegal, should be illegal, and should instantly be and remain illegal forever is public sector unions. Public sector unions are bargaining with nobody on the other side of the table. The public sector union puts enormous amount of cash and an awful lot of street leather, just general electioneering, in order to buy politicians who are going to be good to unions. This is the story of the Democratic Party. Unions give the Democrats money. They get out the vote for Democrats. They elect Democrats, and then Democrats pass laws that are favorable to unions. This is the iron rice bowl of American labor movement. But in a public sector union like longshoremen or air traffic controllers or fire and police, if the police department goes on strike, I don't get to go to another police department. If General Motors workers go on strike, I can buy a Ford. That's the simple answer to it. Unions, people have a right to unionize. They have a right to collective bargaining. There's no question about that. So I don't like generally how those things are run, but that's just my opinion, and I'm not entitled to enforce my opinion on somebody else. You have a right to be in a union if you want. But you also have a right to not be in a union. When we talk about the fact that there is something as a right to work state, which means that you can work without a union, it's a right to work country, for God's sake. This idea it's a right to work state, you don't have to be in a union in order to work here. When did this happen? It's a right to work nation. Screw you. If you don't want to be in the union, you should have a perfect right to work not in a union. You get a chance to work if you want to be in a union, be in a union. If you don't want to be in a union, don't be in a union. There's an advantage to both sides, which generally boils down to union wages are usually better than non-union wages, but union work is much harder to get. So generally speaking, it balances out as long as you have the right to not be in the unions. And Darth Chuck the Mirthless is exactly what I'm saying. I just can't repeat it. Well, right to work state my entire life. F the unions. Exactly. F them. F them. They're money-grubbing communists. Couldn't agree more. And they're corrupt, and they've got ties with organized crime, all of that. I'm not a fan. Not a fan. But public sector unions should never have been illegal. Reagan fired the air traffic controllers because they were a public sector union. They were not allowed to go on strike. That was a condition of them being hired in the first place. And when they went on strike anyway, he said anybody who doesn't show up to work on Monday this date is going to get fired. And they said, you can't fire us. We're the air traffic controllers. We're the longshoremen. If you shut us down, the country will shut down. And Ronald Reagan said, well, then we're just going to have to shut down the country, I guess. Fired them all. Boom. That's why Reagan was Reagan. And speaking of the Cold War, the Soviets did not know what to do about that. That blew their minds, that this guy would basically take American air travel and stop it. Commercial air travel ended. You didn't have any air traffic controllers. You had to rush them in from the military. You had to call back retired people. It was really grounded our commercial air service, which is a huge part of the American economy. We travel by air in this country. And when Reagan fired the air traffic controllers, the Soviets could not believe, they were dumbfounded with their mouth open, that a president would do something like that with those kind of consequences because he said he would, because he did it on principle. They just couldn't believe it. That's why when Reagan said, look, we are going to build this thing in space, and if you want to be a part of it, that's fine, but we're doing it. That they would never have believed him if it hadn't been for him firing the PAC controllers, which he did in the first, I want to say, month or two of his first administration. That's what made Reagan into Reagan, was that he was a friendly, funny, nice guy, but he had balls of steel. He just simply, when he said he was going to do something, he did it. He didn't put up with this kind of crap. That's exactly what we need. Trump is built the same way as Reagan. He just doesn't have Reagan's charm, and the charm is what made Reagan work. That's why you had Reagan Democrats. You don't have Trump Democrats. Well, you probably do have Trump Democrats. In fact, I know you have Trump Democrats. You just don't have anybody admitting they're Trump Democrats. Reagan was so charming that Democrats would openly say, I'm a Reagan Democrat. Yeah, I voted Democrat my whole life, but I just really like this guy, and I think he's really got it down, and I just like him. That's what would happen with Trump if Trump had a better personality, but he doesn't. So we don't have a Reagan. We got a Trump. And Trump's a knife fighter. And Reagan wasn't. we also didn't have the degree of venality in our opposition. There's a long way between Barack Obama and Tip O'Neill, long way, in terms of what their view of America should be. You could disagree with Tip O'Neill about what America should be, but Barack Obama and the rest of them want an America that's not America. They want America gone. You don't get to have that privilege. Here's a Lapco92 super chat. People don't have lifelong employment anymore. We get CEOs that are in the company for 5 years at best, fudge numbers, and get a good exit deal and bail. Yes. And we have the exact same thing in public sector unions, too. I remember hearing about this several years ago in California, where people would become like, let's say, the water commissioner for Fresno, let's say, right? You're the commissioner for water in Fresno, and you would be commissioner for 6 months, at which point you'd retire. And the reason that this system worked this way was because they were constantly being promoted. They'd do 6 months and they'd retire. Then they'd promote the next guy. They'd do 6 months and they'd retire. They'd promote the next guy. He'd do 6 months and retire. And it was this iron rice bowl, because if you were commissioner, your retirement benefits were enormously higher than they were if you weren't. So what they were basically doing is, they're basically saying, everybody have the job for 6 months, then we all get to retire at this insane amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year of retirement benefits paid for by the taxpayer, and the taxpayer's got no voice in this. So screw you guys. Screw you. Screw you guys. Okay, here we go. Broke college students, second time asking in very large letters. We better take this one seriously. Topic, IVF polygenic score embryo selection, individualized eugenics. Okay, all right. Hello, Bill. Developments in genetic testing make it seem plausible that embryos used for IVF fertilization, in vitro fertilization, sorry, it took me a second, can soon be tested genetically via polygenetic scores. This will show what many of their likely traits are going to be, including propensity to disease, intelligence, and personality traits. This is not genetic editing, but rather a selection from unaltered sperm and eggs. And this is more of a refined process of natural genetic selection done through natural mate selection. This may be necessary to the genetic health of populations, especially the 1/8 of the globe that still practices cousin marriage. Civilization is so successful that childhood cancer can be survived, but the genes that are likely to make that more common are passed down. Yes. What you're basically saying, if I understand you correctly, is the more successful civilization becomes at dealing with disease, the more disease stays in the gene pool. If cancer killed people at age 1 month after birth, then there wouldn't be cancer anymore, because the people who were carriers for cancer, thank you, John Eden, $99 super chat, $100 super chat, for no reason except other than being just a swell guy. So if cancer killed everybody 6 months after you were born, or 6 days after you were born for that matter, there'd be no more cancer anymore. Cancer would, as a genetic defect, would be out of the gene pool. It wouldn't be passed down. If cancer killed everybody at age 70, then you can have cancer constantly reproducing itself because it's only killing people after their reproductive years. So if I understand correctly, yes, I see where you're going with this now. So let's go back to the question here. This is the stallion nursing the crippled foal to health and letting it mate. Yes. There is a story about this which is I've heard several times, and basically it works like this. There's a mare gives birth to a colt, and the colt has deformed legs, and the females all gather around this little deformed baby colt and try to nudge it to its feet and try to protect it and nurture it and all the rest of it. And the stallion sees this defective colt and immediately just runs in there and kicks the thing to death. And everybody's horrified at hearing this story. But what the stallion is doing is the stallion is making sure that that genetic defect is not passed on. If that colt is allowed to live and is taken care of, essentially, helped to its feet by its mother and its parents and so on, if it lives long enough to reproduce, then that genetic defect gets passed down, and so the colt has a genetic imperative built into it to destroy that defect before it can reproduce. And by the way, since we're on the subject, I am 100% convinced that this is the origin of human bullying, that bullies are an echo of the time when we used to have to kill the weak because we simply could not afford to take care of crippled, weak, unusual. We just didn't have the resources to care for less robust or less survival prone members of our species. I think that's why bullies exist. I think it's a primal thing. I don't think the bullies understand it. And by the way, I've mentioned this before, bears mentioning again. This is why that advice, that if you're being bullied, you need to hit the bully in the face. This is why that advice works on a genetic level. The bully doesn't understand why he's bullying. He just knows he has to do it. He has to pick on the weak and the sick and the nerdy and the ones that appear unfit. And what he's doing is he's punching them and poking them. And if they don't respond, then what that's telling him on a genetic level is that this individual is not worthy of survival and must continue to be attacked. The second that the victim punches the bully back in the face, it deactivates the bully. It deactivates him. He doesn't hate the kid anymore. He goes on to find some other weak kid to pick on, because it's proven to him that this is not what he thought, which is, in other words, a weakling that's not capable of surviving. I'm 100% convinced that this is the nature of human bullying, and that's why the cure for human bullying is so simple. It's just that so few parents, and when I say parents, I mean fathers, there's a lot of missing fathers these days. Your dad should, especially if you're a little boy, it's a little tougher for girls. In fact, it's a lot tougher for girls. But for boys, your dad at an early age, at age 6 or 7, by the time you're 6 or 7, should have gotten you some boxing gloves and should have gone around with you and shown you how to hold a defense and how to throw a couple of punches and hit you hard enough to knock you down, but not to kill you or to permanently maim you, just enough so that you know what a little bit of pain feels like and that you can get up again. And then you, once it becomes known that you will fight back against a bully, you're immune for bullying. Nobody will touch you anymore. I understand that is the way it is in prison. I've never been to prison, but I prepared myself for that eventuality, because you never know when Kamala Harris might be elected, for example. And virtually everybody who's been in prison, who's on this, at least on some level, has some goodness in their heart, tell you that one of the first things that's going to happen is you're going to get challenged, and you have to immediately respond to that challenge. Somebody's going to come over and they're going to say, hey, I want to sit there, or somebody's going to want to take their food, or somebody's going to want to do something. And the only thing that will save you is for you to immediately start to fight with these people. Just immediately make it clear. And you think you're going to get the living daylights kicked out of you, or maybe you're going to get stabbed or whatever. No, just the opposite. You know, that's what they're looking for. They're looking to, are you a punk or a bitch, or are you going to be a man about things? They're not interested in they want to know right off the bat, the second you get in there, what you're made of. And you better prepare yourself to face that test, because Roger Ramsett says three punches to his face and my bully stopped forever. And word got around, so you were not only not bullied by that guy anymore, you're not bullied by anybody else. I had a bully with me situation once. The guy threw a basketball in my face in first period phys ed in 7th grade. I was terrified of this guy. I really was. He was just out to get me. And I was terrified of him. And we had first period phys ed at 7 o'clock in the morning in Miami, and it was cold, and Miami cold. And we were out there playing basketball for I'll never forget first period phys ed as long as I live. And we were playing, 3-on-3 basketball or something, and this guy just threw this basketball in my face, and I didn't even think about it. I just reached out and smacked him in the mouth. And I thought, now I've done it. And then I knew I saw this guy between 4th and 5th periods or something, because his locker was 3 down from mine. I thought, man, when I get to my locker, this guy's going to kill me. He threw this basketball in my face, and I punched him in the mouth, and he's going to knife me, because we were just a bunch of, sweet little white lambs from Key Biscayne. We were, middle class kids, and went to this junior high school that was 1/3, white American kids, 1/3 black American kids, and 1/3 Cuban immigrant kids. And the black kids and the Cuban kids were tough, and we were not. So I thought, this kid's going to knife me. And we got to fourth or fifth period or whatever, and I'm standing there staring straight at my locker. I see this guy down here, and I look over at this guy, and he looks over at me, and he says, "Hey, how's it going?" I said, "Good." That was the end of that. Just like that. Boom. Done. I think if I'd gone to the coach and said, he threw a basketball, I think it would have gone differently. Anyway, so back to the question. From what I've read and heard from geneticists, I think that genetics has a much more significant role than you would give credit for. Well, when you say you, I don't know if you mean me personally or people in general. I personally have a great deal of appreciation for how much of life is genetic. It's astonishing. It's really quite shocking. And it's alarming to a society that is predicated on ideas like fair play and the underdog and equal opportunity for everybody. It's an unpleasant fact that people have advantages in some areas that other people don't have, and we don't like it. But that doesn't mean we get to lie about it. It doesn't mean we get to lie to ourselves about it. It's real, and it's very, very important. Moving on to the same question here. As always, there's variation in outcome in genetics, but by no means genetics is by no means everything. But don't ignore the massive predictive power it has. Genetics has impacts on religiosity, personality, intelligence, justice, impartiality versus tribal, disease or chronic illness, sociability, likelihood of psychopathy, I suppose, degree of aggression and violence. Yes, I'm sure this is all genetic. I'm sure it's largely genetic. But as you say, it's not exclusively genetic. This is the magic realization. You can't pretend that genetics is not a factor. It's a big factor, but it's not the only factor. And you can often account for genetic disadvantages by environmental factors. So, in other words, you could have somebody who is genetically inclined to be more intelligent, or is in fact genetically more intelligent than somebody else. But if that somebody else is raised in a family where hard work and education is valued, and they read all the time, in other words, you could have a person who's genetically less intelligent than person B is genetically less intelligent than person A. But if person A is born into a household where there's nothing going on but throwing pots and pans and watching TV and drinking beer, usually intelligent people don't act that way, but you get the idea, then that person is going to be disadvantaged in their nurture, while they may have had an advantage in their nature. So it's a complex issue. But to pretend that genetics has nothing to do with it, which is where we live today. This is the world of today. Genetics has nothing to do with anything. Can't even talk about it, because if you do, it's the end of the world. We can thank the Nazis for that. But it's just not true. Of course, it's enormously predictive, enormously. This appears to be different on an ethical level. That is meant as a neutral statement. Polygenetic scores only work within ethnic groups. You can't use Asian data to predict outcomes for a Russian. No, Russians are Asians. Partially Asians. Get the idea. Thoughts? What would an adult conversation look like for this? Are all non-Western countries would likely jump on this? I'm not arguing that civilization is bad. No, Andrew Klavan mentioned that the suicide wish of the Western intellectuals and the Western elite is largely due to the Nazis. Is just that they simply couldn't square the fact that would be something that a civilized country did. And Germany was an extremely civilized country, and it always has been when it has been murdering people. So what an adult conversation about this looks like is kind of like what I've been trying to do here. First of all, the most important thing about the genetics issue is whatever genetic advantages or disadvantages you have or are born with has no effect, and I mean zero effect, on how you are treated under the law. That's the single most important thing. That morally and legally, all men are created equal. When they say, when the Declaration says that all men are created equal, Thomas Jefferson, being one of the most brilliant men that ever lived, was fully aware of the fact that he wasn't equal to the guys down the street. When he said that all men are created equal, he knew as well as anybody that that this is an insane thing to say. Of course they're not created equal. Of course they're not. Some are taller, handsomer, some are shorter, some are the variety is endless. What he meant was, and he didn't have to specify it because it was clear. It couldn't have meant anything else. That's why it was such an obviously critical thing to say. To say that all men are created equal, and to say that it was apparent, it was it was self-evident. That's a profound statement what he made. Really, I'm not a gigantic Jefferson fan, but this is genuine intellectual and rhetorical genius. For him to say that it is self-evident that all men are created equal, that is a profoundly provocative and interesting statement, because it is self-evident that they're not. It is so self-evident that they're not. All you have to do is look at any two people and realize they're not created equal. What he's saying is revolutionary because it's a self-contradicting statement. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. What is he really saying? He's saying it's self-evident that all men are created equal under God, equal under the law. That all men are created equal means that they have equal rights, equal standing, that no one is less or more. You may be more intelligent, you may be taller, you may be handsomer, you may be healthier than somebody else, but it doesn't mean you are better than them. It just means you are different. And so that is a profound statement, and this is how we find and keep our way through this path, which is an important path and needs to be discussed. It's important for many reasons, and it's important we don't lie to ourselves about things. Some people just have more advantages than others, and they're born with it, and the sad fact of the matter is, to a large degree, there's nothing that we can do about that. There's nothing that we can do about the fact that people are not created equal, except for religiously abide by the idea that all men are created equal under the law, that justice applies to all, that justice is not dependent on the color of your skin, how smart you are, whether you're rich or poor, where you come from, important family, big family, little family. No. All men are created equal under the law. And if you understand that the differences the genetic differences between people does not make them better. I'm not naive enough not to say that, look, here's a guy who's 6'1", he's in tremendous shape, he's very healthy, he's very smart, and so on. And then you've got another person who's not that tall, not that strong, not that big, health complications, all kinds of things. I'm not trying to say that this person isn't more fit than the other person, but he's not more entitled to survive than the other person is. Everybody who's been given life on this earth has an equal right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody has the same right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's got nothing to do with what advantages you may have at birth. Yeah, I think I did that rather well, actually. I think that's basically it. Okay, we got Eric Blake, we got a Charles Tomes, and then we're done. Hooray. We're doing a little better. We had a couple short shows. We are now at 2 hours and 13 minutes. Yeah, we'll be under 3, but we'll still get it done. Yes, I think that's right. Eric Blake, here we go. He's so excited. It'd be fun to watch him clapping his little hands and jumping up and down on his little chair. Topic, the October surprise. So, Bill, one of the near constants of election season is that ever-notorious October surprise that suddenly paints one of the tickets in a new light, usually negative. I'm very curious which of the recent news stories, all of which arguably has shaken things up in our favor, actually qualify for the honor. Hurricane Helene aftermath, the longshoremen strike, Israel versus Iran, Kamala's consort slapping around an ex-girlfriend. I'm pretty sure Jack Smith trying to artificially generate an anti-Trump surprise with his public reveal of his detailed brief, but of course it's weak sauce. Nobody cares about Trump's legal problems. Nobody cares. It's not going to affect a single vote anyway. Let's put it that way. So as October begins, what issue do you think the honor of official October surprise will settle on? Will the concept in the end turn out to be just not so relevant anymore? What say you? Yes, I think it's the second one. The more ugly politics gets, the more mud that's flung, the lower the tone, the more coarse and the more invective that's thrown around, the muddier politics gets, the less important the October surprise is. Oh, somebody did something immoral. Well, imagine that. The October surprise thing is, I think it's overrated. I don't know. Now, you're perfectly happy to send me a long list of examples, but I don't know where it's actually changed the course of an election, although I'm sure I could probably think it over. But my point is, what is the surprise going to be? Is the surprise going to be that Kamala Harris, is the evidence that she's a communist? Is there going to be evidence that Donald Trump had relations with some super hot woman for money? I mean, what's it going to be? Gary Hart. Okay, you're right. Absolutely right. Gary Hart, yes. Gary Hart was knocked off his perch. But if Gary Hart were running today, it not only wouldn't have hurt Gary Hart, it probably would have helped him. That's how far things have gone since Gary Hart. And by the way, I knew Donna Rice in the most superficial way, met her a couple times, but my friend Fritz knew her rather well, that they'd been acting in a couple plays together, and I wouldn't say they were close friends, but they were certainly on speaking terms. And she was a very, very nice person. I thought she was really, really sweet. Yeah. So I just think that it's overrated, Eric. I can't. There's been so much mud slung and there's just so much daily garbage. You know, it's just so much going on a constant basis. Like, oh, great, okay. I guess the best way I can put this is, I'm not saying there isn't anything. I am just saying that in my honest opinion, it's not for rhetorical effect, but honestly, I cannot think of a single thing that could be revealed about Donald Trump that would change my mind about this election. Nothing. I'm not saying I couldn't sit down and invent something at a typewriter, but in terms of things that could actually happen, no. I just don't. I just don't see it, and so I'm not too worried about it. I think everybody knows what's going on at this point. Likewise, there's nothing about Kamala Harris that would make me change my opinion of her. I mean, I just can't. I can't think of anything. I think things have become a lot more coarse. I know they've become a lot more coarse because, as this great example, I can't believe I didn't think of it, but obviously it's a perfect example. Gary Hart went from being the front runner to being out of the race because he was caught having an extramarital affair. If that happened today, it wouldn't even be a hiccup. So I mean, let's just put it to the test here. I like Melania very much. I think she's very elegant, and I think she's long-suffering, and I think she made a fine first lady. But if the October surprise is Donald Trump has been fooling around on Melania Trump and that he's having an active affair, I'm just saying this as a potential. I'm not starting any rumors because I'm using it as a hypothetical. Would that change my vote? No, it wouldn't change my vote at all. No. I don't care. Things have gotten desperate, and I maintain what I started this show with, and that is that I've come to believe you cannot kill this country. You can screw up the government an awful lot, but nobody's buying what the progressives are offering in government, and nobody's buying it in the pop culture either. So it is. I think we have passed peak progressivism, and I think we passed peak progressivism years ago. Nobody's buying the trans movement. If we were buying the trans movement, they wouldn't have to shove it down our throats. If that's what losing looks like. Losing is when conservatives start saying, you know what, we really ought to have a serious discussion about whether we want to transition our kids. That's what losing looks like. We're not losing. The country is more conservative now than it was when I was a teenager in the 70s. Much more conservative now. It's just that these communists have entrenched themselves very deeply, and they have a very vocal but not very wide support base. How many social justice warriors? I mean, what percentage of the population would you say would describe themselves as social justice warriors? What percentage of the population? I'm thinking it's probably around 5, 6, 7%, something like that. That's not losing. And as we mentioned earlier, it's not like feminist women are reaching their end of their fertility years filled with joy and happiness that their $100,000 car and their $700,000 condominium has brought them. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing just the opposite. We're not losing, we're winning. We're winning big. These people control the loudspeakers, they control the narrative. Every year that goes by, the mainstream media becomes less influential. I haven't watched television in forever. I watch nothing but YouTube, which is why, and I'm not alone in this. So if this election goes south, then Elon Musk needs to buy YouTube. Then I'll make a damn case and I'll put it to him. I'll make some phone calls to people I know who know him, and I will say, listen, Elon, I'll give it to you in 60 seconds, man. I'll give it to you in 30 seconds. You want to save this country? You want to save SpaceX? You want to keep SpaceX in America? Me too. You have to buy YouTube. Doesn't matter about the rest of Google. Just YouTube. That's all. And I think if that happened, we'd be out of the woods. YouTube, you know what YouTube streams in a day? Total number of hours of YouTube that goes out in a day? It's 1 billion hours a day. 1 billion hours a day are watched. I just know this because I just watched a segment I did called The Invisible Man. I just caught the first part of it. I did it 2 years ago. I'd forgotten the numbers. Right now, if you were to freeze the internet right now and you were to watch YouTube 24 hours a day, it would take you 144,000 years to watch everything that's on YouTube. 144,000 years. That's in one day. And not only does it stream 1 billion hours every day, but every day it uploads tens of millions, well, I don't know if it's hundreds of millions, but certainly tens of millions of hours. Millions of hours go up every day, that's for sure. So 99% of it is crap, says Steve Whoop. I couldn't agree more, but nevertheless, that's where it is. So I don't see an October surprise being in the cards. We got one left to go, and that's from our friend Charles Tomes. From an undisclosed location in flyover country where the governor and state house have already passed laws and orders preventing an unconstitutional overreach of local, state, or federal laws and the regulations infringing on God-given rights, Darth Chuck the Merciless rages. Watching from half a country away, we watch Cletus McFarland and about 40 other private helicopter owner pilots operating out of a small private airport, flying their own personal helicopters at great risk and expense and asking nothing in return, delivering medications, water, supplies, Starlink downlink stations, and good wishes to the people stranded in the foothills of the mountains in West North Carolina. Then Sniff and Blow decide to show up for a photo op, and the TFR shuts down the drones and private helo operations. The TFR is a temporary flight restriction. A local fire chief told a private helo operator he would be arrested for rescuing a woman and her husband. Words fail. Discuss. Well, this is what I mean when I say they can destroy the government, but they cannot kill the country. I'd be willing to bet you that that local fire chief who told the helo operator that he'd be arrested for rescuing a woman and her husband, I'd be willing to bet you he did not deter him. Most people, hearing something like that, I actually have I am part owner in an airplane that is not with me anymore, and I probably could, it's a long story. But it's a very light airplane, and short of a helicopter, I can land that thing anywhere. I could put that airplane down in 400 feet. I could easily put it down in 300 feet. I could put it down to a football field without batting an eyelid. And watching, this is not the Long Easy. The Long Easy is much more runway hungry. This is the Sky Arrow, and it's a beautiful little airplane, and it's two-seater, and I've watched this disaster going on, and I've thought, man, if I was, I'd almost be tempted to fly the thing back east just to help out, because this thing can get places that a Cessna 172 can't get to. This thing can get into the kind of fields that a Piper Cub can get into, and I know how to get that plane into very small places and get it out again. Every time I would land that airplane, every single time, I would request a short approach. I didn't always get it, but I usually got it. I would just fly the pattern, and when I was parallel with the runway on the downwind, I just chopped the power and just glided in. Every single time, just glided in, just cut the power to idle. I didn't turn the engine off because I'm not an idiot, you know. But yeah, I just turn the corner, glide it down, stay high and tight, and then when I was sure I had the field made, I just slip her in and crank her out at the last second, and boom, stalls at 40 knots. So once you got the wheels on the ground, you sit on those brakes. Well, you actually don't even sit on the brakes, because the brakes are operated by two finger levers. They don't have toe brakes. It seems like it wouldn't work, but it does. It works great. And I love that airplane. I'd get it back, except I can't afford to operate it right now, unfortunately. We're kind of in a revenue bucket, and I'm doing my best to get out of that. But there that is. I would love to have gone over there and helped that. I offered to volunteer for search and rescue for people because this thing is nothing but canopy. It's just got this enormous canopy, and the back seat has windows, you know, like this. I mean, it's unbeatable for observation. It is simply the most perfect observation platform I've ever seen. It's got better visibility than a helicopter does. And I wanted to register with the Civil Air Patrol to be on call for search and rescue missions. Somebody's up hiking in the hills or something in the Santa Monica Mountains, they get lost. I wanted to be the guy they call, and we just go up there. But they had, and this is not unreasonable. Well, it's kind of unreasonable, but their regulations were you had to have, first of all, you had to have a pilot and observer. I am 100% behind that idea. No argument about that whatsoever. None. That makes perfect sense. You want a guy who's doing nothing but flying the airplane. You got another person doing nothing but looking out the window. But it required a certain amount of horsepower per person. And this airplane had an 80 horsepower engine. And that was when it was new. So I think it was probably down to around, I don't know, 70 horsepower at that point, which is not a whole lot of horsepower. Victoria wants me to play a video of me and my plane. A video of me in the Long Easy is just a racing beast. I can thank Burt Rutan for giving me and thousands, probably there's certainly tens of thousands of other regular guys who wanted to be fighter pilots a chance to fly a fighter airplane. That Long Easy was propeller in the back, the nose of the thing just looked like a Hornet. I just loved it. Really miss it. Texican says, to be in the Civil Air Patrol, you have to have zero knowledge of how to fly a pattern. I'll tell you a Civil Air Patrol story to wrap this thing up. Anyway, yes, words fail me too, but this is a great example of what I meant by you can screw up the government, but you can't kill the country. They can start doing things like saying, well, you can't fly here, and if you do, we're going to prosecute you. And my be arrested for rescuing a wife and husband, my response to that would be, I'm looking forward to it, Chief. I'm going to be back in about 25 minutes. I'm calling to make sure that the news crews are here because I want to be on television when I'm arrested for rescuing a couple. So you bring your people and I'll bring mine. See you later. We're out of here. That's what I would do. And that's how you stand up to bullies, by the way. That's all it is. This guy didn't like it because rescuing people is his job, and he's making them look bad. He's making it look bad, and making them look bad. And that's because they are looking bad. So I'm with you. But the fact of the matter is it's happening. And the Cajun Navy that was bailing out people during the floods a couple years ago was in Texas and so on, I think. You got private citizens who out of the goodness of their heart are spending hundreds or thousands, or usually thousands of dollars of their own money. They're putting their boats on trailers. They're driving for 400 or 500 miles. They find a place where they can put their boat in the water, and they're going rescuing flood victims. Nobody's telling them how to do it. Nobody's teaching them how to do it. They're just doing it. Get out of their way. Get out of their way. This is what we're good at. This is what we do. And that's what this right angle that is going up tomorrow is about. It's about how badly it's Steve Green's right angle. And it's not only on how badly the federal government has failed in the Carolinas, but just how well private citizens have done. And as usual, we are not the government. And elections are about the government. Elections are not about the nation. The government has a lot to do with what life in the country is like, but it's not the heart of the country. You'll never kill the heart of this country. You're never going to kill the United States of America. Never. Never. And these Marxist bastards can try all they want to. They've already failed. They just don't know it yet. They're dead men walking, and they don't even know it yet. That's how far behind the times they are. These people are so far behind the times that they think that they can have Kamala Harris on Oprah and have, look, it's Julia Roberts. Who? Oh my God, it's Ben Stiller. Wow. I guess I better reconsider my vote. If Ben Stiller thinks I should vote for Kamala Harris, who am I to argue with a celebrity? It was laugh out loud cringe. It was horrifying. I'm not going to tell the Civil Air Patrol story because it's a mean story, and it was a one-off case. The Civil Air Patrol is a good organization, and I don't want to knock them off. But I will tell you another joke that I heard, or that I saw. Let me get myself in the headspace for this. It was a Saturday Night Live joke, I think. Give me 1 second. So it's a guy who's it's improvisational comedy. It's improvisational comedy. And the guy is saying, okay, ready? Here's a scene. Oprah Winfrey and Swing Blade at a restaurant. And the first person goes, these fried taters. Yep. These fried taters, these sure are good, Yep. The other person says, oh, come on, Oprah. You always say that, Oprah. I botched the punchline, but yeah. French fried taters. Yeah. Oh, come on, Oprah, you always say that. It's it's supposed to be Sling Blade and Oprah. So the first person says, "Oh, these fried taters, they sure am good." Uh-huh. And the other person says, "Oh, come on, Oprah. You always say that." Get it? She loves them taters. Exactly. I love that movie. I thought it was a great movie. I thought Billy Bob Thornton is a brilliant guy, and that is a amazing performance. He destroyed his voice doing it. He said he just killed him. But I really liked that movie a lot. I thought it was a great movie. So anyway, all right. I think we're done. We are done. By gosh, by golly. It's 8:55, but I have finished the show and I've uploaded it, so all I have to do is just send out the email and yeehaw. You got a purty mouth. Squeal like a pig for me. It's hard on the South, man. Well, some degree the South has earned it, but by and large, I think people are very unfair to the South. I lived in the South for many years. I grew up in Florida, but if you live in Miami, you have to drive north to get to the South. But in Gainesville for quite a while. Boy, that scar is kind of acting up today. Eric says the scar on Bill's lip is perfect compensation for the soft hands. These are the hands. Look at this. Look at that. You see that? These soft hands. Look at that. Look how nasty that scab is there. You see that? I got this. When did I get this? I got this 3 days ago doing my spark plugs. I did my spark plugs on a 2018 Camaro, and the reason I'm so damn proud about that is you got to take a lot of stuff off of the engine before you can even see the engine. But yep, got that one right there. Got that one back in 24. Yep, got that one working on my bitchy Camaro. Changed plugs on that baby, and she just goes humming on after that. Today I took out the center console. The center console was, I'd given up on my car. I just, we've had this conversation. I'm gonna start again, but I've decided to make my Camaro into the car I thought I was buying when I bought the Camaro. So the center console had like salt in it, from in the little cracks, and it was just kind of, nasty. And so I took the center console out of the car earlier today and just hosed that baby down, pressure washer, and got all that gunk out of there. And then I armor-alled it. Now it's like nice. I got iridium spark plugs. Your spark plug is probably platinum, which is fine, I mean, it's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, just platinum spark plugs, but my spark plugs have iridium tips, and you don't gap them, because gapping a spark plug is just so 20th century. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, Vern? I miss him. I thought Jim Varney was brilliant. I thought he was brilliant. He made me laugh till I cried a couple times. And he just seemed like a good-natured guy. Just really loved him. Well, it was great. He was great on Fernwood tonight, too. All right, I think we're done. Yeah, I reckon we're done. So, so I was, last night, just getting ready for bed, and Natasha took a look at my hand. She said, "You look like a mechanic." I said, "I am a mechanic." I felt good. I felt real good. Thanks, my guy, says Jay Battis, #1. You're welcome. I don't know why that bothered me so much that night. Sure as hell did, though. Vectron has unobtainium spark plugs. He does. That's what allows him to travel faster than light. Let's see the scars from changing the wiper blades next. The wiper blades. No, I'm not. It's boring. Never mind. It's not even worth the time. It's not worth the waste of disk space. Okay, that'll do it, kids, for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com, to whom we are very grateful, as always. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll sign ourselves out of Twitch first tonight, I reckon. Yeah, I reckon we will. All right. We'll see you guys on Monday. We'll hopefully have a chance to talk to our friend Texican and get some more of these renderings up and get back into Major Mace Mattingly, which I love. And a bunch of other things that I have to do as well. Thank you for that, Russians there, Dave Big Booty. Appreciate it. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll see you Monday night right here on your very own Stratosphere Studio. Hooray! All right, YouTube, I don't like those people. Let's just be clear now that they've gone. I don't like you, YouTube, and you don't like me. Let's just get that straight. We know this from the beginning. I don't like you, and you don't like me. So, just get on out of here. Go find somebody else to go watch a stream on. You make me stink. All right, kids, thanks for joining us. See you guys on Monday. Have a good evening and a good weekend, and we'll see you when we come back on the other side. We gone now. Bye-bye.